Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Inside Guns with your host, me, the Yankee Marshal. Today I want to address a couple of questions that have arisen from some previous videos I made recently. Videos where I talked about, is the SIG P320 safe? And are striker fired guns in general safe? And that's caused a lot of people to ask me, basically, like I said, two questions. One, they're saying, is a Glock safer than a SIG P series gun? Is it actually safer to carry it? Just period. And should someone carry a Glock over a SIG if they don't feel comfortable with the P320? Well, first off, let's answer the last part of that question first. If you're someone that doesn't feel comfortable with the SIG P320, don't carry it. And that goes for any gun you don't feel comfortable with. If you don't feel comfortable with a 5-shot revolver because there's not enough rounds, don't carry it. If you don't feel comfortable with a Glock because it's striker fired, don't carry it. If you don't feel comfortable with a 1911 because you're afraid the safety will come off and the trigger's too light, don't carry it. Carry whatever gun makes you feel most comfortable, that you're most confident with. There's no reason for you to carry a gun you don't feel like is the best gun for you. Whether that's based on fact or just some notion you have in your head, right or wrong, it's the right decision for you to carry the gun you like better. Doesn't matter if there's any real reality backing up your opinion. Just carry what you like. That's the number one rule as far as I'm concerned. If you feel confident with a gun and comfortable with a gun, you'll use it more, you'll practice more, you'll be better with it. So that should answer the second part there. I've got no stock in SIG or Glock. I own both, and I would never tell anybody to carry one over the other unless it was because they wanted to carry one over the other. They both have the same issues that most striker-fired guns have. Now that brings us to the first part of the question. Is the Glock, though, marginally safer than the SIG? And the answer to that question is yes. And, well, no. And, maybe. It depends on which gun you're talking about and the circumstances you're talking about. Now, Glock does have one thing SIG doesn't have. It has that little dongle on the trigger. The thingamabobby there. I think it actually is called a dongle or a dingle or something like that. But they have that, which helps keep the trigger from being pulled. A lot of guns have that. Smith & Wessons have that, etc. So it exists on other guns, but the Glocks all have them. SIG doesn't have them. SIG does not have a trigger safety. It relies on the other mechanisms of the gun to make it safe. So the Glock does have one mechanism that the SIG doesn't have. But does it make it actually safer? Are you actually going to have circumstances where that dongle prevents a negligent discharge? Well, it depends on who you listen to. Now, when Glocks first came out and police departments started switching over to them, I know a lot of you guys are too young to remember this, but there were tons of lawsuits against the Glock. Unions suing police departments to get them to get rid of the Glocks because they're too dangerous. They just go off on their own. The big thing back then is we didn't have the internet to amplify everything like we do now. And, the internet wasn't as big as it is now. So not everyone heard about it, but it was enormous. It was a much greater extent than what the SIG is having a problem with right now. It wasn't a few clumsy officers. It was like major lawsuits from unions against whole, units, etc. Glock even had to start making a special trigger bar for New York City Police Department that increased the weight of the Glock triggers so that they would continue to use them. So there was lots of fuss about the Glock back then. And a lot of people did a lot of contrived experiments, like they do with the SIG P320 now, beating it with a hammer, putting it in a vise, all that stuff. And they were able to show that 99% of the time the dongle doesn't do anything. That under most circumstances, whatever is moving the trigger is also going to move the dongle. So they were able to show through repetition that it doesn't do much, but it does do something. I disagree that it doesn't do anything. Now, granted, if you get something like your cloth from your shirt in the trigger guard and your holster's not down all the way and part of your shirt gets in it and you push it down and it goes off, that's not going to really matter if there's a dongle or not because it's probably going to engulf the trigger. Same thing if you get something wedged in your trigger guard in a way that it's pulling back the entire trigger, like a pin in your purse or something like that. it's going to fire the Glock just as easily as it fires the SIG. But there is one circumstance where it wouldn't do that. Let's say something's wedged in the trigger guard in a way that it's only touching the side of the trigger and it's pulling it back through pressure on the side of the trigger. Well, on the SIG, that would still fire if it was enough pressure put on it. But the Glock, wouldn't fire under that circumstance. Now, how much safer does that actually make the gun? I think you could easily say not enough to even measure. Really isn't going to matter most of the time. Hey, but if it makes you feel more comfortable, go with it. That's up to you. But it does do something, just not enough. It doesn't do much, the little dongle. And that's been shown time and time again, and it makes sense. If something covers the trigger and makes the gun go off, the dongle's not going to matter. But it is there for that rare occasion where the trigger is fired simply from pressure from the side. Now, here's another thing. Trigger weight really matters too. If you look at Glocks, they come from the factory with like a 5.5 to 6.5 pound trigger. The one I have right now in front of me, or this one right here, if I measure this trigger, it actually comes to about 6.5 to 7 pounds. And it's fine, works great. Problem is, a lot of people modify those triggers down to like 2.5 pounds, 3 pounds, and that makes it far more likely to go off, even with the dongle, than a SIG would be if it was at like 6 or 7 pounds, because it takes way less of an event that actually flags the trigger to cause it to go off. A light brush of your finger that would have not put off a 7-pound trigger will put off a 2.5-pound trigger quite often. So trigger weight matters. Like I said, Glocks come with 5.5 to 6.5 pounds usually, but people often modify them down to 4 pounds, 3 pounds, 2 pounds even, 2.5 more likely. But SIG comes with a 6 to 7.5 pound trigger. It's like 6.5 to 7.5. Little heavier. Not heavy enough that you notice. Now my SIG, the one I have, has a 4-pound trigger in it because, it's a special edition gun, has a better trigger. So that's why I said it matters which gun you have. Overall, trigger weight is actually going to give you more safety, I think, than the dongle, because it'll have more of an effect in more situations. It doesn't have to be just where, something is perfectly wedged to where it only touches the side of a trigger, which is not very likely. Trigger weight will work in all of those occasions. Like if something gets in your trigger guard and when you push it down, it applies 4 pounds of force to the trigger. If you've got a Glock with a dongle with a 3-pound trigger, it'll go off. If you have a SIG with no dongle and a 7-pound trigger, probably not going to go off. Now, will even this make much of a difference in the long run? Probably not, because you'd be surprised how much force is generated by these accidents. Like if you stuck a pencil in a trigger guard and pulled it with minimal effort, just moving like an inch, you can create 20, 30 pounds of force easily because you're basically using a lever. Same thing with a piece of shirt that is stuck against your body and in the trigger guard. Can create a lot of force. So the weight of the triggers, even in those situations, probably isn't going to make much of a difference. But like for those casual times when your finger brushes the trigger while you're reholstering, heavier trigger is going to make the gun safer. So Glocks are safer than SIGs if they have factory weight trigger with the dongle compared to a SIG that has a lighter trigger. But if you have a SIG that has like a heavier trigger compared to a Glock with a lighter trigger and a dongle, still the SIG is going to be safer in that situation. Probably under real world circumstances, the SIG will have a negligent discharge less often than the Glock. So there's a lot of factors you got to consider. Trigger weight is one of them. The dongle, to a lesser extent, is another one. So keep that in mind when you choose which one you want. But in the end, like I said, they're both about the same. Striker fires usually suffer from the same issues. So choose the one you like and carry that one. Hey everyone, one last thing before I go. I want to tell y'all we got a new product over at TYMPpistolproject.com. There's a link in the upper corner of this video. If you want to go over there and buy some merch to support TYMPPP, we now have an Eeyore shirt, one of my favorite fictional characters, and it has one of my favorite quotes from Eeyore on it, which is, "A little kindness, a little thought for others, that makes all the difference." And I have taken some liberties with it, and now it says, "A little kindness, a little thought for others, that makes all the difference." And if that fails, shotgun. So if you want to buy one of these special edition Kindness and Shotgun shirts and support TYMP, like I said, use the link, go over, purchase one. As I said, it does support TYMP. And every shirt you get one entry into the monthly friend drawing. And every mug you get one entry into the monthly friend drawing. So go on over, get yourself some merch, and support a very good cause. And with that, I am out of here. I hope y'all enjoyed the show. I hope to see you again tomorrow. Until then, remember, always carry and stay safe until I see you again.